So, and you've been covering forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China for over a decade. And, I know with crimes against humanity, you don't really want to rush things too much. You don't want to take action too quickly. But, the U.S. government is finally starting to do some things. Can you give us a little update?
Well, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, they're terribly premature in their actions. This whole thing is very half-baked.
It hasn't even been 2 decades.
Seriously, my book is about three years late, and I feel very guilty about that. But nonetheless, people have started to operate in the U.S. government on 2 findings. One was by Jacob Levy and Matt Robertson, which did a kind of a huge data scrape of the internet, the Chinese internet, and were able to show that doctors are commonly operating, they're doing live organ harvesting. I mean, you can describe it a number of different ways. They're not respecting the brain dead rule and so forth. But really, it comes down to that. They're doing live organ harvesting. Now, this is something we've known about for years because way back, 10 years ago, Enver Tohti admitted, the Uyghur doctor admitted that he performed live organ harvesting on a execution ground in Xinjiang.
That was back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, well, it was back in the 90s. And he was the first person to kind of stand up and say, I did this with my own hands. That was a very important admission. Over the years, he's gotten a little more comfortable saying, look, I killed this person. They actually could have lived. They have been shot in a non-lethal way. I could have fixed them up, but instead I was told to remove their liver and kidneys, and I did that, and the man died. We don't know if that man was a political prisoner or religious prisoner or just an ordinary criminal. He did not have short hair like a convict. He had long, normal hair. And that was in Xinjiang. It's very likely the man was a Uyghur, and it's very possible he was a political prisoner. What we've been able to determine since then was that the transplant industry was built on the back of Falun Gong bodies in general, majority. And after that, Uyghurs. But to actually come to that conclusion, you have to have some studies out there. And Matt Robertson and Jacob Levy put together a very nice study on this, on the live organ harvesting issue, which only went up to 2015 because then everything cuts off. They stopped talking about it. They stopped putting in little admissions in their data. That was very compelling, particularly because it was published in I believe in the American Journal of Transplantation, and which is very respected. So within the medical world, this is very important. I'll get to that in a second. The whole medical world's role in this, which is pivotal. At the same time, I have been walking around, I put some paper out on it because I felt guilty, because when I went to Kazakhstan, I was able to establish that there was a rate of organ harvesting of Uyghurs in the camps. And I did this just through talking to refugees in Kazakhstan. What was interesting about the findings was not that I had so many, I had less than 20 people, but they were incredibly consistent from camp to camp. Nobody was in the same camp, and they all described something that if you actually interpreted what they were saying, it was about 2.5 to 5% of the camp goes missing every year, and that within that, the average age is 28 years old. It's often exactly 28 or 29 years old. That is precisely the age that Chinese prefer. Chinese medical establishment prefers for organ harvesting. And it's also, I guess this is important as well, is that this is usually following a test, always actually following a health check, what they call a health check, which is basically a blood test, and possibly a DNA kit is used as well to get a very, very good, what we call cross-matching. That is, you can get a very exact match to somebody who's looking for an organ, be they foreign, be they Chinese, doesn't matter. That test is run about a week before the people disappear. And these people disappear in the middle of the night. What's interesting about them is that other people leave the camp. It's usually young people, and they're going off to work somewhere. It's even called graduating, and there's often applause that's encouraged. It's usually announced during lunch. These people just disappear in the middle of the night, and you're not supposed to speak about them again. It's very dangerous. They're unpersons, like 1984. And so they're also sometimes given certain signals. For example, one of the Chinese teachers in the camps, a Uyghur, saw that they put check marks by certain, after the blood test, they put up the blood test in the faculty lounge, just on a wall, and then they put check marks, pink check marks by some of the names. Those were the people who disappeared. And in fact, in some places, in some other camps, people were given pink wristbands, or sometimes orange. In one other camp, somebody described they had to put on a vest that was pink or orange. Okay, these were marked people. Now, that's not something I've written about in a formal way. That is, and I haven't. I've written about it. I stand by those results. I have tapes of those interviews, but I haven't, fleshed them out in a granular fashion. But that's what I'm doing now. Is for a new book is to do that. That's one part of the new book. And that has been picked up by Congress.
So I want to ask you a bit about the Uyghurs that you interviewed in Kazakhstan. You said you interviewed 20 people and they're all from different camps, right? Now, the chances of 20 refugees being from 20 different camps is pretty low unless there's an enormous number of camps. There's got to be at least 100. Otherwise, it's too big of a coincidence. Right.
It's well over 100. It's considerably over 100. I don't want to venture a number on that because there's arguments and debate about that. My book, I'll have to address that subject, but I'm not really there yet. Look, I think it's kind of abstract in this case. The Chinese don't even name the camps, for God's sake.
They're numbered?
No, they don't even give them numbers. I mean, this is what's astonishing. It's very hard to identify these camps except on Google Earth. And only some people can do that. But nonetheless, they're clearly in different places and they're clearly different camps. And there are enormous numbers. And so, I've taken the most conservative estimate, which is about 1 million Uyghurs in detention at any given time. Now, most of my witnesses actually weren't Uyghur. They were actually Kazakh, because Kazakhs have an unusual ability to get out of the country. Because they have relatives in Kazakhstan, they're ethnic Kazakh. They have relatives in Kazakhstan. Sometimes they can, lobbying can be arranged. Sometimes just getting across the border somehow can be arranged.
So these are people who graduated from the camps and then escaped?
No, they didn't graduate. These are people who basically got out after doing their time. That is a year and a half, 2 years. And usually they got out because there was some kind of pressure coming from inside Kazakhstan, from the family. Maybe a bribe was paid. We didn't get into that much. That's some other people have studied that more extensively than me. I'm more interested in what their experience in the camp was. The difficulty then becomes, these are Kazakhs, so they're not wedded to the Uyghur cause, if you like. Kazakhs and Uyghurs are friends. They're like cousins, but they're not always friends. In some cases, one man told me, were there any disappearances in the camp? And he said, no. And I said, what do you mean? There were no disappearances at all? He said, not among the Kazakhs. And I said, well, what about the Uyghurs? And he said, I only care about the Kazakhs. And I said, well, thank you, brother. It's good to have him. He's a great guy, actually. A very funny guy. And, the Kazakhs, they were clearly going through the motions more on the Kazakhs. In other words, I did not discover that Kazakhs were disappearing for organ harvesting. That does not mean it doesn't happen. But I didn't get that. All right. I have to go with my results here. I did not get that. However, they're excellent witnesses. Why? Because they don't have as much skin in the game, right? They're not wedded to the Uyghur cause. They have no reason to exaggerate things. They're very good witnesses partly because these days you can't talk in the camps because their surveillance is total everywhere, from toilet to where you sleep to where you work. The surveillance is there. And so people don't talk. And if they do talk, it's just sort of like, can you hand me that wrench kind of stuff. And what that does is a little bit like somebody dying of hunger. Your sense of smell and your taste buds get better, actually, and your eyesight gets keener. And this was true in this case as well. So they're very, very observant people who have no skin in the game. Therefore, I find their testimony is very, very credible, which is why I've kind of stood by it. And I've had no trouble saying that I get this 2.5 to 5%, which comes out at about 35,000 people being harvested a year, approximately, if you assume 1 million in the camps.